Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to ReelQuick, episode 74. We got a special episode for you guys today. Obviously, Oppenheimer is dropping this weekend, so we figured we would hop on, give you guys our Christopher Nolan rankings beforehand. So let's just get right into it. No need to stall. We know what this man is capable of. We know he's one of the GOATs. Questionably better than like Stanley Kubrick and all the greats like that.
You have annoyed so many people, including me.
But all right, without further ado, Seth, kick us off with your number 11 ranked Christopher Nolan. What falls at the bottom of this iconic filmmaker's filmography for you?
Yeah, so I think this is kind of like a common, I guess, the general consensus. I've got it's following. I keep wanting to say the following. It's just following. Yeah, obviously it was his directorial debut. Very low budget. I do think it showcases some pretty good visuals. I think it's a fairly interesting premise, but I think it's a serviceable and solid debut. It doesn't really offer much more than that. I was pretty uninterested in, considering the film itself is, I believe, only like just over an hour. It's definitely a lot long from what I remember. I think I watched it about a year ago.
Yeah, so 69 minutes actually.
Lol.
Nice.
I just think, like you can clearly see the visual flair there, but nothing really mesmerized me. But I don't think, the thing is, it's his debut. You don't really expect much, especially when he was a younger. I don't know how old he was at the time. Low budget, good visuals. Not really too interesting, but some good techniques on show. I think I have it at I'm pretty sure like a 2.5. I think is my rating for that. That's my 11.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback off that because following is also my 11. Echo everything you said. I think there's flares of Nolan's eventual filmmaking style, but overall this is just it's a very directorial debut for the 90s, and it's just like, it's tough to like move past that because there's so many instances where I watch this movie and I'm like, this feels like, some 16-year-old's project in his backyard.
It's like a film student's first.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, it's got flares of like where Nolan is headed in his career, but overall it's just kind of every aspect of the film just kind of falls flat for me, from the writing to the camera work. So that's my number 11. Tyler, I assume it's also your number 11?
Yep, it is, and pretty much echoing everything you guys are saying. Like I said in my review, it feels like a Christopher Nolan debut in terms of the both senses of, it feels like a debut, like very much feels like someone's first film, but also feels like Christopher Nolan's debut because you see a lot of nuggets and glimpses of what like he's capable of in this. One thing that annoys me is, why does every directorial debut just have to be black and white? Like Damien Chazelle was the same thing with Guy Madeline on a Park Bench. It's very much like, look at me, I'm an indie filmmaker breaking in the industry, black and white, retro film. It's like, it's just really corny to me. And I feel like all the film students are like, oh, that's so real of him. And I'm like, no, it's so corny of you guys.
And then it's even funnier considering like where Nolan has taken his. He's like the furthest thing from an indie filmmaker now.
Yeah, but he still does, like, because Memento does black and white.
Yeah,
black and white. But yeah, he does that more for perspective switches now, as opposed to just throwing something in black and white just because.
Yeah, that's valid. All right, let's get into the top 10, even though number 10 is still bottom 2. Seth, where do we go with number 10?
Yeah, you guys aren't gonna like this. Actually, I don't know what Tyler's talking about, but my 10 is 10.
I think I know what your 10 is.
Tenet. Yeah.
Oh.
I know what you thought it was gonna be.
Okay, I thought it was something else. Okay.
Yeah, so Tenet's an interesting one, man, because admittedly, I think this is a film that, like I say about a lot of films, it needs another watch. It needs a couple at the absolute minimum. I have only seen it once, so kind of take that into account when you hear this. Because I do think it could go up. I think it has more good than it has bad, or at least it did on my first watch anyway. I just think it was really convoluted. I think Hart's moments were too self-indulgent in the confusing factor, and for me that kind of swayed me off. I think visually it's really good, and I do actually like the premise of it. I think it's an interesting way to tackle dimensions and stuff like that. I just, on my first watch, I found it to be really bloated. I didn't really like the audio design, which I know is a common complaint from Tenet, about Tenet as well. But again, I think I need to rewatch that because it has been. I actually didn't. Did Tenet get a cinema release? It was obviously 2020.
No, it did. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Because Tom
Okay.
Cruise did the famous, like, he went to see it and he was like, the movie theaters are back. Everyone come back to the theaters. And very much was wrong on that.
Okay. So I think I watched maybe 10 in 2021 actually. So it's been a while since I watched it. And obviously my taste has changed since then. But yeah, like the main thing for me, I just found it a little too self-indulgent and confusing for its own good, and it kind of masked the positives. Although I still have a positive rating because I definitely enjoyed it, I guess. I think I have it like a 3 out of 5. So again, still a positive rating, which means I don't have a negatively rated Nolan, which yeah, it's a pretty positive thing.
That's just goat stuff right there, man. Just goat stuff.
I actually have a negatively rated Kubrick as well, which is kind of but yeah, man, like it's something I need to rewatch, and I actually might this week before Oppenheimer, because I've watched most of them. I think all of them actually, except Tenet in the past year. So that one is kind of slipping by. But as of right now, that sits around the 10th spot.
Have you only seen Tenet once?
I only seen Tenet once, yeah.
Okay. Tyler, where do you go with your number 10?
Coming in at number 10 for me is The Dark Knight Rises. So it's still a 4-star for me. So really following at a 2.5 is the only one I don't like, and all the rest I think are like very good movies. Honestly, like the final scene of The Dark Knight Rises ties together the trilogy so beautifully. And honestly, if it wasn't for that last scene, I feel like I'd be like even like maybe even like a 3 on The Dark Knight Rises. The more I rewatch it, I really don't care for it. Talia al Ghul, everyone obviously has their problems with her. Catwoman, I really enjoyed Anne Hathaway's Catwoman, but the thing is with like the Bale and Bane, or I mean just the Bale Batman in general, like the combat is so rough, and I don't think that it's all Bale's fault. I think the suit they designed for him, I feel like is really restrictive on the body or something, because I feel like he just looks stiff in all his fights, and I feel like The Dark Knight Rises more so than any of the Nolan trilogy relies a lot on like hand-to-hand combat fights, and of course like the ending one where there's just like an all-out war in the streets, but they're just like fighting with their fists in like the middle of the streets. Is like there's like a nuclear war going on. Why are you like fist fighting right now? Like you kind of gotta, when there's a nuclear bomb at stakes, you gotta get rid of your like no kill like mantra. You gotta make some exceptions there. But yeah, it's like it's still a very good movie, like a 4-star, and I love watching it from an entertainment perspective. But I think the more I watch it, the more issues I have with it.
Yeah, that is where I also thought Seth would go with his number 10 spot, considering how much he rags on it.
No, I rag on it, but at the same time, I still like it.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think it's like nowhere near his best. I'm not going to spoil anything.
Okay, fair. My number 10 is Insomnia. And don't take that ranking like too personally. Everything in my top 10 is above a 3.5 out of 5 stars, even Insomnia. Obviously, I hold Nolan higher. I really appreciate that this is like right there with Memento as like one of his tighter screenplays. Al Pacino, Robin Williams, Hilary Swank, they're turning in fantastic performances, but the screenplay is just not as intriguing as I would like it to be compared to obviously other Nolan films, Memento being, the best example to compare to Insomnia. So at 10, I have Insomnia. So I went following Insomnia. Seth went following Tenet, and then Tyler went following Dark Knight Rises. Seth, crack us open with your number 9.
Yeah, so 9 I have Insomnia. Interesting one. I actually watched this like fairly recently, probably the past 6 months or so. It's a difficult one because it's like I almost give it a direct comparison to not quite as bad, but like Alien 3 for Fincher, where it's kind of like a studio's idea. They kind of put Nolan onto this remake of a project. Obviously, it's a remake of a Norwegian film. I actually haven't seen the Norwegian film, so I may have to watch that. I think it's fine. I think it serves well. I think it's engaging. I think it's a good thriller. Obviously, I like the performances. Robin Williams and Al Pacino always, are stars as usual. And Hilary Swank, of course. I think that this really never lives up to the premise and never kind of reaches its full potential because, again, not particularly on Nolan, but it is painfully predictable at times in my eyes. And I think it's not full of, but there are consistent sequences that are bland, not particularly where I want to go. And I think there are a few strange narrative choices, particularly towards the ending, which again isn't really a fault on Nolan, but that's why I compare it to like Alien 3, for example, because it's very similar to how I'd say about that, because it's not really Fincher's fault, but there is some issues I would have. In terms of the direction, I think it's good. I think it's got some visual flair. I think it's engaging. Again, I like it. I think I have it at 3.5. So same as George. So I still like it. I still think it's a good and engaging watch, but nothing really more than that. So that is my 9. That's my 9.
Insomnia is also so interesting because this was only, and it's the same thing with Damien Chazelle. Damien Chazelle and Christopher Nolan both did like these very low budget directorial debut films, and then for their second films, they managed like such massive start. Like, how do you go from following 69 minutes, no one of note in that movie, to 3 years later casting Al Pacino, Robin Williams, and Hilary Swank? Like, how do these actors trust you as a filmmaker to, at this point in your career, to like join in? Same thing with Damien Chazelle, where he went like, he cast who? It was Whiplash. So J.K. Simmons, Miles Teller in his second film. Like, I find that's, I don't know if that's like trust on the actor's part or what.
I think it was like, from what I mean, I don't know the ins and outs, but I think it was more that the production team kind of saw something in Nolan. They had this, the studio had this project in mind, this remake in mind, and they kind of just shoved it on him. So it would be interesting because, like you said, he obviously, this is being his second film. He'd only was it his second film? It was, wasn't it? When did Memento come out? Like 2003.
Memento came out 2003.
Oh, Memento came out 2000.
2000 actually, yeah, 2000.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, that makes a bit more sense.
Okay, so that makes way more sense. That's my fault. Okay, yeah.
They would have seen it probably from Memento, stuck him on this project right after. He wouldn't have really had much of a say of what goes on, because obviously Memento, he worked with Carrie-Anne Moss and Guy Pearce, who are obviously big actors as well.
Yeah.
So I thought Memento was after. I thought it was like mid-2000s for some reason.
Yeah, so did I. I thought Memento was like right before The Prestige, which I guess it's not. Tyler,
I do, yeah.
What is your number 9?
Yeah, my number 9 is Insomnia. I think this might be the only Christopher Nolan movie he didn't write. So like we were talking about, and when it comes to like Al Pacino and the cast attached, I wouldn't be surprised if this is something where like the studio had the actors picked for this movie before they even had Christopher Nolan picked.
Yeah.
And then it was something where they saw Memento, they're like, oh, that's a mindfuck movie. Let's like throw Nolan in this, because this is Insomnia was executive produced by George Clooney, so similar to like what you heard about like Leonardo DiCaprio potentially doing an American remake of Another Round, which I think might be dead in the water, but regardless, it seems like it's like a big name actor will find some foreign film and like produce it for America. So I think this is like George Clooney's version. And I haven't seen the original, the Norway version. I know it has Stellan Skarsgård, I believe, but still, even with that, I just don't know if I would enjoy it more than like, it's Pacino and Robin Williams. Like, I get it, like 99% of the time I agree the original is better than the American remake, but it's gonna be tough to find like get more compelling acting than like Pacino and Williams. Even though I don't like love this movie, I still really liked it and found it pretty engaging, and I thought Pacino especially did a really good job, and Robin Williams is obviously always like incredibly quirky in these movies where he has to play someone like with an off-kilter mental state. So yeah, number 9, Insomnia.
Amazing. Now I think we're getting into the meat of the Nolan filmography. Seth, I'm assuming I know what your number 8 is.
You do, yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say, I thought it was gonna fall way closer to the bottom than number 8.
No, so obviously it's Dark Knight Rises. It's a difficult one because I am fond of the moments of the Dark Knight Rises. Like, I definitely don't dislike it. I have it at 3.5 again, which is a positive rating. I think Dark Knight Rises is best described as a ridiculous, over-the-top mess, if I'm honest. But again, there is fun to be had there. I just think thematically, it's really, really messy at times, especially in comparison to the previous 2 we got in the trilogy. I think that there's a lot that goes. There's a lot of choices in this one that for me were unsatisfying, particularly with the ending, and kind of lacked the oomph we needed to end this trilogy. And it really does bring down the trilogy in my eyes significantly. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of fun to be had. I think there's some of the most iconic sequences, especially with Bane as a character. I think that the direction is still there. It's just the combat is a little bit of a mess. Like Tyler said, it relies on the hand-to-hand, which I don't think is Nolan's strong suit, which we've seen in the previous Batman films. That's definitely not Batman's film's strong suit, is the hand-to-hand combat. But I still can watch it. I still can enjoy it. There's just a lot of moments that irk me and that annoy me. But at the same time, it's nonsensical fun. And if you've spent time, if you enjoyed or loved the Begins and the Dark Knight, there's still a lot of love to be have here with the characters. And of course, the cast in this one is probably the best. I mean, regardless of Heath Ledger and whatever, but the overall cast is fantastic in this one. There's a lot of interesting characters, a really charismatic cast, and I do love Tom Hardy's Bane. But yeah, it's just a bit of a mess, and I think I actually think the more I've watched it, the less I've liked it, to be honest. It's a 3.5, so it's a positive rating, but that is my number 8. 8.
That was number 8. Yeah, and I'm just gonna follow up because my number 8 is also The Dark Knight Rises.
Oh, I thought you'd have that. Okay.
No, it's a 4 out of 5 for me. So I still I really love it. It obviously has glimpses of the greatness of The Dark Knight. I think Christopher Nolan still does a good job at giving us an effective Batman story. But for all the reasons you guys said, I think, Talia al Ghul was a misstep. I think Tom Hardy as Bane was slightly underused. The hand-to-hand combat throws me off every time I watch it. I absolutely love that we get these massive set pieces in a Batman film. We saw it in Batman Begins a little bit at the end, and now we're seeing it again in The Dark Knight Rises at the end. That's something I love about Christopher Nolan's Batman movies. He's not afraid to make the stakes feel incredibly high and get entirely Gotham City involved in what's going on with, Batman and Bane or Batman and the Scarecrow or Batman and the Joker. But yeah, I think screenplay wise, it's a slight misstep. There's a lot of questionable directions this film heads, but it's still a 4 out of 5 for me. But that's my Nolan and Batman bias, probably rating it that highly. Realistically, it's a 3.5 out of 5. But either way, it would still fall at that number 8 ranked spot for me.
I will say,
Tyler?
The Dark Knight Rises has a lot of messy moments in it, but one of the best bookended movies. The intro sequence and the ending sequence, I think, are absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah,
that opening plane sequence is one of my favorite sequences in a movie, and of course, the restaurant, with Alfred and Christian Bale, that's just such a beautiful way to end the trilogy. So, a lot of the stuff in the middle I have issues with, but man, what the beginning and ending of that movie is so good.
Yeah, and I honestly probably completely agree with what you said earlier, Tyler. If the ending of this movie, which also happened to be the ending of the trilogy, wasn't as incredible as it was, I would probably rate this slightly lower. So yeah, my number 8 is The Dark Knight Rises. Tyler, your number 8.
Yeah, my number 8 is The Dark Knight. So bold placement. This is a movie that I watched so much as a kid, and I loved it as a kid. And I just need to stop watching it because every time I watch it, I feel like I like it less. And it is a really good movie, but I just dislike it every time. So I think I'm just done with The Dark Knight because Maggie Gyllenhaal is it's so insufferable to me. I know everyone thinks Rachel Dawes is insufferable in Batman Begins, and I also kind of agree, but I thought Maggie Gyllenhaal was worse, but I really dislike her in everything. I really love her as a director, but really dislike her in every performance. Heath Ledger, obviously phenomenal. Nothing needs to be said there, but even the more I watch Aaron Eckhart, I know George, you think really highly of his performance. I really just don't really care for his Two-Face performance. Gary Oldman as well. I don't know. It's just the more I watch it, the more issues I have with it. I think the opening sequence, of course, incredible. Heath Ledger, of course, incredible. I still think there is some messy moments that are similar to The Dark Knight Rises that, again, I've noticed as it more goes on, because I feel The Dark Knight, for me at least, has a few half dozen super iconic moments, which is a lot for a movie, which is why I still give it a 4.5 stars. So I still rate this movie really highly. But I just feel there's a lot of majorly awesome moments in this movie. But I guess from beginning to end, as a flowing movie, I just don't love it as much as everyone else. But I just feel it's a good movie with some super high highlights. And I feel Heath Ledger carries for me, and I just have some issues with some other stuff. But again, I'm just defending my placement, even though I give it a 4.5 star.
Yeah, I'm surprised at that your 8 is a 4.5. I didn't know you were that high on Nolan, I guess. I'm really
I love Nolan. Nolan's a beast.
That might be higher than George's overall ratings then.
Yeah,
probably. I only have a 2.5 for following, and then at number 10 is a 4-star with The Dark Knight Rises.
Oh shit! Yeah. Interesting.
Actually, well, I'm gonna currently. I'm just saying. Currently, my top 8 are all 4.5s and above, but I'm gonna lower Dark Knight Rises to a 4 out of 5. I didn't realize I still had it at a 4.5.
Okay, so you're saying fair enough.
Yeah. One thing I want to comment, Aaron Eckhart. I think I hold him higher than most people. I think this is such an example of a Ethan Hawke, Denzel Washington Training Day, where Denzel is so fucking good in that movie that people forget just how good Ethan Hawke was too. And I think the same thing rings true for The Dark Knight, where Heath Ledger obviously is putting on one of the best performances we've ever seen in all of film, not just a comic book movie.
Apart from Brokeback Mountain, I agree.
Yeah, that's fair. And it's overshadowing Aaron Eckhart as Two-Face, because I think he turns in.
I actually agree. I think he was really good in that.
Yeah, I think he turns in such a good performance. I'll get to my overall thoughts, obviously, when I get to The Dark Knight, which won't be for a while. Spoiler alert. Seth, what is your number 7?
Yeah, so I had a difficult one with this one because so this is kind of where like there's a massive increase in quality. This is where I get into like my 4 stars from the 3.5, but it's like a big jump. So I was stuck between 2, but I think I'm gonna go for Batman Begins. Batman Begins is interesting. I actually think Batman Begins is a great origin story. I really like the simplistic style. I actually really like how Gotham looks as well. I don't think it's the most consistent tonally, and I do think they struggle to utilize the villains as much as they could. But I think there's some really great sequences in this. I think Batman as a character is explored really well. I really liked Christian Bale's introduction and his kind of arc throughout. But I do think the antagonists in this were underdeveloped to themselves. But I think it's gritty, it's simplistic. It kind of pulled the Batman franchise out of the dumps, I guess, because obviously the previous Batman franchise we had was the George Clooney franchise in the 90s, which is what it is. But like, I think it did a really good job, and I do want to stress as well that this is like a 4-star, but it's a big. I hold Begins a lot higher than I would Rises because I think it's a lot more structurally sound. Even though I don't think it's the best totally, I think it uses the characters well and introduces Batman to the world well. And I also really like how Gotham looks. But again, a big issue I have with this film is the hand-to-hand combat, especially in the Batman Begins. It's not great. It's really not. But yeah, I really like this film. So that is my 7, and it's a 4 out of 5. So this is kind of where I get into my higher, I guess.
Yeah, I feel like going forward now we're all rating these movies rather highly. Tyler, where do you go with number 7? I feel like I have a. Did you already give your 8? Yeah, I gave my 8 was Dark Knight Rises. I went right after Seth did.
Oh, okay. So back to me. Yeah, right. So my number 7 then would be Batman Begins. Which, what do I have it at? I have a 9.1, so we're getting real close to like a 5 at this point. It's a 4.5 star. This is my favorite of the Batman trilogy, and it's been that way for a couple of rewatches now. I just think it's such a great introduction to his character. I think at the end, the final third is the worst part of this movie. I think the build-up of the first 2 acts, though, are incredible. And like reviewing and watching any movie, it all has to do with like when you watch it and your mental state and like when, like, how you're feeling and stuff, because like basically like this is when I first started logging movies on Letterboxd the last time I rewatched this, and I just watched the entire MCU through from start to finish, and all I was watching was MCU movies, and I like finished that off, and then I went right into Batman Begins to start like the DC watch through, and like going from all like just nothing but weeks of MCU films to this, like maybe I overrated it on this later rewatch just simply because I was like, holy shit, like this is just so much better than MCU stuff. Just the tone, the darkness, like, because immediately you start off in this movie with like Christian Bale like in the wilderness, like in like that shed with like the fire, like a big like fight that's like brutal hand-to-hand combat, and I'm like, God, I just finished watching like like freaking Captain Marvel and like Thor Love and Thunder and all this shit. I'm like, God, this is just so much better. So I think that could play in a factor to why I like overrated it, because like just the big shock factor of starting this trilogy after watching so much MCU. But yeah, I still really love this movie, just mainly because this is one of my favorite origin stories. I mean, I like the Batman better as an origin story, but obviously when I watched Batman Begins many times, it was long before the Batman ever came out. But I still think this is an incredible origin story, and really, really big leap for Christopher Nolan and his filmmaking in terms of the scale.
Yeah, weirdly, like the more I've been on like movie talk and movie Twitter, I see so many people saying the same thing you said, where they prefer Begins to The Dark Knight. Like, I didn't realize how common of an opinion that was until I like joined TikTok and Twitter. It's a whack opinion, but you know. My number 7 goes to Dunkirk. Which I know for you guys, you both, I'm pretty sure, have it rated very highly. It's still a 4.5 out of 5 for me. I absolutely love that Nolan dipped into the war genre and gave us this really raw and super like personal and intimate story that also just included these incredible, massive set pieces. I think visually, this is also one of Nolan's best. It's fucking incredible. I like the cast and just how subtle everyone's performance was, but just how powerful it was as well. Cillian Murphy, I think, was incredible. The skies just absolutely opened in New York. Jesus, it is pouring fucking rain right now. Holy shit. Sorry.
The streets need
but
you.
yeah,
It's calling you for Batman.
I gotta go. Sorry, guys. Yeah. So I got Dunkirk at 7, and surprisingly, this may be like my least rewatched Nolan movie. I think I've only seen it twice, where I've even seen like Following and Insomnia like 3 or 4 times. Just because every time I do like a Nolan ranking on TikTok, I go back and rewatch like a few of the films I don't remember. So perhaps on rewatch, I'll rate it higher. I will say it's like right there with my number 6. You know, they're pretty much interchangeable. And if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to give my number 6 because Tyler talked about it, so I could just brush on it really quickly. My number 6 is Batman Begins. In terms of origin stories, I think this is one of the best we've ever seen in comic book movies. I do hold the Batman slightly higher. One thing I absolutely praise about Batman Begins within the Dark Knight trilogy is its portrayal of Gotham City. I think that is the absolute best. I think the Batman does such a good job at giving us a gritty Gotham City, and people are forgetting just how good Nolan portrayed Gotham in Batman Begins, especially because The Dark Knight is usually the film from the Dark Knight trilogy that everyone talks about, everyone remembers, and I don't think that movie portrayed Gotham City nearly as well as Batman Begins. It's also just such a fantastic introduction to the character of Bruce Wayne, where he's at in his life at the point of, this particular origin of Batman. Tyler, you touched on it. This movie just opens in such like a cool fashion where like Bruce Wayne is like disheveled, running through these streets of this random city, and he's getting into fights with people. It's a brilliant introduction to like the mental state and where Bruce Wayne is as a person. And then I think this is the movie where Bruce Wayne as a character grows the most. It's the best development of his character within the Dark Knight trilogy, in my humble opinion. But that's not a knock to Dark Knight or Dark Knight Rises. I just think that's one thing Batman Begins does slightly better than the rest. So my number 6 belongs to Batman Begins. Seth, what is at your number 6?
Yeah, so my number 6 is Memento. Interesting one, because I know a lot of people have Memento quite high. I think it's one of the highest rated on Letterboxd, unless I'm mistaken. And I do really like it. Again, this is a 4-star for me, so it's not really a knock because I did really like it. In terms of Nolan's works, I actually found Memento to be interestingly fairly forgettable, which is interesting because I think it's one of the grittiest and most absorbed in crime and dark messaging, and it's one of Nolan's most empathetic films as well. But I found it quite forgettable due to its structure. I don't really like the overuse of exposition, which I do think is needed. I just don't think this is my sort of film in totality. I didn't love the aesthetic as well, to be honest. I didn't actually love the constant use of like flashbacks and stuff like that. I think this is a film that I just didn't completely vibe with, I guess. Although I still really liked it my first watch, which actually only was about less than a year ago, which is kind of weird. I've never been that bothered about revisiting it, and it's always been slightly forgettable for me. The first watch was great, really enjoyed it. Didn't particularly love the constant use of exposition, although I understand in a film like this, with its nature and with its confusing nature, exposition is needed. I think, with Nolan, everyone gives him shit for his exposition a lot of the time. And it's like a case where, I think in a film like this, you can kind of give it a pass. There is a certain amount that is needed to divulge such a complex plot, but it just didn't really pay off for me. Most of it I enjoyed, some of it I didn't, but overall, it's really, really good. It's one of his most empathetic works. It's dark, it's gritty. Guy Pearce is incredible in the role. Yeah. Possibly one of my favorite, Nolan leading performances. I don't know where it would land, but probably in the top 2, 3. I don't know. But yeah, really, really good. 4-star, just, a bit forgettable for me in comparison to other Nolan works. But again, 4-star. So that is my, is that 6th? Yeah, 6th.
Yeah, that was 6.
Okay.
Tyler, where do you go with number 6?
Number 6 is where I go with Tenet. So Tenet, like I was talking to George yesterday about it, this is one of Riley's favorite movies of all time. I actually didn't see this when it came out in theaters for obvious reasons. Like the world was in a very weird place at that point, and I didn't go to the theaters to see it during COVID. And when I first met Riley, she was like telling me she loved Tenet. I'd never seen it, so obviously it's a Christopher Nolan movie. I'm like, sure, I'll watch it, and really, really loved it from first watch. I've seen it twice now, really like it. The biggest issue I had with it was I wasn't sure if John David Washington was not a great actor, if like he was written poorly. And I think after Amsterdam, I think I might be on the side that he's just not a great actor. So
I'm inclined to agree, to be honest.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I didn't want to see it as blasphemous because I remember watching Tenet. I was like, something's off about his performance. I don't know if it's the way Christopher Nolan wrote him or if it's his performance. And I think Amsterdam just locked it in for me. I was like, because I think Robert Pattinson's great in Tenet. So I think it is more just John David Washington's not super. I think that like the issue is like as harsh as to say, he's just not charismatic. Like when he's talking and delivering lines, it's just so dull and unbelievable. Like you don't buy into it. But Robert Pattinson just oozes with charisma. This is very similar to the Dark Knight Rises opening, to where you are immediately thrown into like a high intensity action sequence. And you're like, what the fuck's going on? So it's funny because Seth mentioned Memento having too much exposition. I think it's like a common, not like super common complaint, but like I've heard other people say that. And I think it's funny because Inception's like super confusing and gets super complex. But you can get Inception, but then Tenet for sure is like, if you watch Tenet the first time and you understand everything, you're just lying to everyone. So it's like Christopher Nolan's like finally Tenet. He's just like, I need my final mindfuckery movie before I move on to some biopics and other type of genres I want to do. So definitely a complex movie to bite into. But I mean, one of my favorite movies ever, or like style of movies ever, when I first started getting into movies, is the type where you watch it, it blows up your brain, and you like go immediately to YouTube for hours to watch movies, like trying to digest it. And that's what you have to do here. Yeah, I don't know. I really enjoy this movie. I think a lot of people hate on it for improper reasons. I feel like a lot of people hate on it who haven't even like given it a chance, or especially given it a chance to rewatch it. So if you haven't seen it, I would give it a rewatch. Or if you've only seen it once, I'd give it a rewatch because I just really like Robert Pattinson in this one, and the visuals are super cool. And this is also a really fun one for people who are like just film fans. Like this is a real fun rabbit hole to go down for behind the scenes stuff, because how they filmed like a lot of these, and like especially like they use like real like hand painted artwork for a lot of the backdrops, and it's just a lot of cool stuff from like a production design and filmmaking techniques on this movie. So I really like Tenet and really appreciate Tenet too.
Yeah, this is one movie in Nolan's filmography I wish I rewatched before this ranking, because I do think it would have fell a little bit higher. I've only seen Tenet twice, and I haven't seen it. Those two times were the week it came out. So I'm like super outdated with Tenet, but I wish I had like seen it before. I think that's going to be my watch tonight. Before we get into what?
Where was Tenet on your list?
Number 9.
Okay.
Yeah. Before we get into our top 5, let's just recap our 11 through 6. I had Following at 11, Insomnia at 10, Tenet at 9, Dark Knight Rises at 8, Dunkirk at 7, and Batman Begins at 6. Seth, what was your 11 through 6?
Yeah, so it was Following at 11, Tenet at 10, Insomnia at 9, Rises at 8, Begins at 7, and Memento at 6.
Awesome. Tyler?
Yep, I had Following at 11, 10, The Dark Knight Rises, 9, Insomnia, 8, The Dark Knight, 7, Batman Begins, and 6, Tenet.
Awesome. Now we're getting into our top 5, you know, the meat of the Nolan filmography, where he's most likely solidified himself as one of the GOATs, according to Seth, number 18 of all time. Was it 18?
No, it was higher. I like Nolan. It was like
was it?
50. It was like 50.
Oh, okay. All right,
I like Nolan. Nolan's cool.
I'll tell you. All right, then kick us off with your number 5.
Yeah. So my number 5 is The Prestige. Interesting, actually. So Prestige, on my first watch, I think I would have had this higher. I think it was like 3rd for me. Upon rewatch, I did like it a little bit less, but I still think it's great. It's another 4-star. I think it's clever. I really like both Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale in this. I think it's clever. It's mysterious. I love the production on this one. I think the production and the costumes are great, and it really has that kind of that feel to it and that aesthetic that I really, really enjoy. I do think that, especially on the first watch, there are some of the twists are really good, and we know that Nolan likes to play the mind games. It works for some, it doesn't work for others, and I think this is very much a Nolan film in that he tries to throw you around every bend. And a lot of the twists work, especially one on first watch, especially kind of the end, the final one. I think that was great. I think that was really, really well puzzled together. But I think my only letdown with this film is I think it tries to do too much in terms of the twists. I think there's too much drive towards pushing you around every corner to the point where you almost expect another twist. So at that point, you receive one. And I noticed that more on a rewatch. And I think that encapsulates Nolan as a filmmaker, because whether you like it or you don't, I tend to like it, but I think it gets to a point where it gets a bit much with The Prestige, for me anyway. But I still think The Prestige is really, really good. I like all the cast in Scarlett Johansson is great. Scarlett Johansson are young, Hugh Jackman, Christy Bale, etc., etc. Also like fucking David Bowie and Andy Serkis as well, which is cool. The main thing I love about this one is the production. I think it's great, and it is puzzling, and it's tricky. But yeah, I think it just tries to do too much in regards to the narrative twist. But yeah, really good film. That is my 5, and that is a 4 out of 5.
Yeah, and I'll just continue from there, just because The Prestige is also my number 5. Seth, we're overlapping a little more than I thought we would, honestly.
Nice.
Yeah, Prestige is my number 5, and again, I know, especially Tyler, a lot of people hold that movie a lot higher. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. Every movie in my Nolan top 5 is a 5 out of 5. Pretty much echoing a lot of what Seth said. The one thing I love about The Prestige is the redirects and the twists and just how well they work. This movie is just very unpredictable, which I absolutely love in terms of like where they take the characters, where they take the narrative. And I think it just all kind of meshes together very well for obviously that like final big reveal between Jackman and Christian Bale's characters. Nothing I need to say about the acting. It's Christian Bale and it's Hugh Jackman and it's Scarlett Johansson. These are 3 of the best actors of our generation. And this is where, for me, obviously, I haven't mentioned Memento, so spoiler, it's ranked higher than The Prestige, but The Prestige is really where I felt like Nolan came into his own as a filmmaker. This is really where he like kind of decided what route he wants to take in terms of like these massive productions and also incorporating like these nonlinear storytelling. And it just feels like such an like official introduction to his career. Again, even though I rank Memento higher, as you will see, but The Prestige just feels like this is where he really decided like what path he wants to go down. I absolutely love The Prestige. Again, everything in my top 5 is a 5 out of 5, so don't take that number 5 rank for The Prestige too personally. Tyler, what do you have at number 5?
Number 5 for me is Inception. So nothing really, like, I mean, you were talking about movies with stacked cast. Like, this has Leo DiCaprio, it has Joseph Gordon-Levitt, it's got Cillian Murphy, it's got really just like stars galore. And I mean, I don't know, I feel like of all the Nolan films, like Inception's one that you just need to say the least about at this point. Like, it's like such a complex film, really pushed a lot of stuff forward that I've seen a lot of films try and emulate since then, with like the whole world bending aesthetic. I've seen so many films try and copy since, but none have really been able to quite capture like Christopher Nolan. From like, this movie was iconic from the moment that very first trailer came out, with like the, you know, the blah, like the epic, like that immediately took the whole world by storm. And yeah, I saw it in theaters, I believe, and, you know, obviously rewatched it a ton throughout the years. And it is one that I think is actually even more complex than people give it credit for. I think this is one that a lot of people like to say they have figured out. And I thought I used to be at that point too. And then I watched like a super long YouTube video explaining like it even deeper than I've ever seen explained before. I'm like, man, there's still a lot of stuff that even people that say they like understand Inception still haven't quite grasped. So I feel like it was just a very complicated screenplay, a very complex movie. I really didn't care for his relationship with his wife. Like, and she's the same person who played Talia al Ghul, right? Like the same actress, I believe. Yep. So I don't know if it's just her acting that I just don't really buy into for both those movies, or if it's the way she's written. It's probably a mixture of both, but didn't really care about the relationship too much. But other than that, like, that's really the only gripe I have with it. I really enjoy Inception. I love the setting, from going from these world-bending worlds to like the, you know, the middle of the snowy mountains where they're kind of doing the final raid at the end, while also being in the middle of that bus that's falling off of the bridge. Like, it's just such a cool set piece. And again, like the same thing I can say with Tenet. This is a great one for film nerds to look at behind the scenes stuff. Like, obviously, like the rotating hallway and so many like the production designs of Christopher Nolan's movies, in terms of the settings he can get, but also in terms of the practical effects he does on all his movies, are super cool. And Inception's no exception.
I know, like, we always like make fun of like Creed 3 for like the consistent discourse, like, oh, there's so much anime inspo, but Inception's one movie where I'm surprised we don't see that more often, because there is a lot of anime inspo, especially from like the rotating hallway to just like specific like shot selections here and there. I'll talk more about Inception when I get there. I think Tyler hates me based on his Inception and Dark Knight ranking, but, you know, whatever, it happens. Seth, your number 4. Now we're getting into the meat of the rankings.
Yeah, so my number 4 is Inception.
Okay, you both hate me.
I will say, George, that this was actually my 3 last night.
Okay, so you definitely hate me.
I rewatched something, which went up a little bit.
Okay, no spoilers.
Yeah, no spoilers. But I do like Inception a lot. I think Inception. I am going to be that guy. I do think the exposition in this bogs down a rewatchability. I really, really do. For me, anyway. And I am also going to be that guy and say, I don't care about the characters in this film. I just don't. I don't care about the relationships. I don't care about the characters. But I am also going to be that guy to say that I think this is a overused term, but a technical marvel. I think it's incredible to look. I think this is a science fiction epic that is, an enthralling combination of kind of beautiful visuals and a charismatic cast. Even though I don't particularly care about the characters themselves, I think the charismatic cast and who they have on show. I mean, actually, it's unfair to say I don't care about all the characters because Leo was like, I kind of do, but let's say most of them and their relationships. But I think it's such an interesting premise, and I do agree with Tyler. I think it actually is more complex than most give it credit for. I was definitely one of those guys. Like, I remember the first time I watched like 2001 or Inception or whatever, who said like, understood it on the first go. I definitely didn't. I think it has, its storytelling is layered and potentially more, like Tyler said, more complex people give it credit for. And I think that it does require multiple watches. But I think for me, the exposition just bogs it down slightly. But it is a technical marvel that deserves to be applauded because deserves all the plaudits because it does look just incredible. And some of the set pieces, the rotating door, I love that scene. I will regularly watch that scene. And of course, can't really mention Inception without mentioning the score as well. Which, if you didn't know, I actually saw live recently. Which, very good.
So fucking jealous of that.
Time blew my head off.
God,
it's a great film. It was 3, but on rewatch last night, it's still really high. So it's still a 4-star. It has been like probably 8 or 9 months the last watched it. I don't think too much of a change. It might be worth watching again soon. So I know Anna hasn't seen it and she wants to watch it, so I might do that soon. But yeah, 4 out of 5, really, really good film. Just not like it's. I think so. This is the last film. I will say, spoiler. That's a 4-star for me, anyway.
Very nice. My number 4 is Memento. Again, I mentioned this when I talked about Insomnia. I think Memento is like Christopher Nolan at his best screenplay wise. Like, I think it's his tightest screenplay. It feels like his most personal. I love the nonlinear storytelling. It can get obviously a little confusing at times, and this is definitely one of many of Nolan's films that beg for a rewatch. Guy Pearce, I don't know if this is like an exaggeration, but outside of like Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, I think this might be the best performance in any Nolan film. I think he's fucking mesmerizing, and he can't.
I think I'd have it third.
It's just one of those performances where, like, one, I just can't imagine anyone else having pulled off this script better. Two, I just can't imagine this movie would have been received as well as it has been if there was someone else in this role who didn't live up to what Guy Pearce did. But I absolutely love Memento, and we're in our top 4 right now. All 4 of these are in like the top 50 of all time, like greatest movies of all time, not just favorites. That's how highly I hold the remaining 4. Tyler, where do you go with number 4?
Yeah, piggybacking right off your discussion, Memento is also my number 4. I think this is just really Christopher Nolan coming into his own as a filmmaker. Like, this is obviously his only second film. You could really see nuggets of something like this from Following, where you could see him trying to put the pieces together of trying to make a confusing, non-linear, mindfuckery type movie. And I feel like the pieces really came together with Memento with some great acting performances and some interesting filmmaking techniques with like the use of color and black and white to indicate forward and backward motion. It's just been he just has such a fascinating career to watch, and he really is like one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. And if we're talking about purely average, he might be my number 1 all time, just purely based on his average rating. Like, I mean, I give 10 out of 11 of his films above a 4-star or 4-star or above. So like, not really many directors out there that I have rated that high. So I don't know. This movie's super gritty. It's super like, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's unapproachable, but like I feel like Inception is just as mind bending as this in terms of confusing plot. But I feel like Inception, maybe it's just because like Leo DiCaprio and more name brand cast, whereas like Guy Pearce I agree is incredible, but your everyday Joe's not going to know him as much as like a Leonardo DiCaprio. So maybe that's the reason. And I guess it just has a grittier aesthetic. But something about Memento, I'd like hesitate to like recommend to like my friends to watch like immediately because I feel like this is more like a. It's not even a niche film, but I just feel like it's just one of his least approachable films from like just a kind of a casual film watching experience. But I really enjoyed it. I've only seen it once, so I definitely need to rewatch on it. But even on first watch, I gave it a 9.4 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed it. Such an interesting concept. It was a short story by his brother that then Christopher Nolan like adapted into a long form story. And his brother and him have actually collaborated on a lot of the writing for their movies. So just a cool movie, honestly, that I definitely need to rewatch.
Yeah, outside of like following, Memento is definitely, I think, like Nolan's like least accessible just in terms of like the experience you're gonna get watching it. Like it's no massive scale film like Interstellar, Inception, where you could be pulled in from like the science fiction aspects and just everything he's doing like so cool technically. It's like one of those movies that just requires constant attention. And it's like it's tough to recommend Memento to a friend who isn't as big a film nerd as we are, just because of like the nonlinear storytelling, the confusing narrative and stuff like that. But it definitely, in my mind and Tyler's mind as well, warrants a top 4 spot. Seth, kick us off with your top. Yeah.
Do you want to hear something that may surprise you? I think this is surprising. Memento has more logs on Letterboxd than The Prestige. You don't hear about it nearly as much, do you?
Does it really?
Yeah.
Well, Memento.
That's really.
Well, I guess The Prestige is in the IMDb top 100 too. I was gonna say because Memento's in the IMDb top 100, so maybe more people try to tick that off. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah, valid. I didn't realize Memento was in the million watched club. Honestly,
I had no idea.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Seth, you're number 3.
Yes. So my number 3 is the rewatch I had last night, and that is Dunkirk. So I've seen Dunkirk. No, last night was my 3rd watch. I think Dunkirk is. I really, really think it's incredible. I think it's one of the best war films of this century so far. I think it clearly shows the disorientating, oppressive nature of war by showing these different perspectives, these different characters, and what they go through. I really like how he doesn't showcase the enemy. I think it's just solely focused on the English's perspective in this. And I really I think it shows the balance between like the moments of victory and the moments of the mental well-being, the positive moments to the negatives, to the triumphs, to the scared nature that the soldiers faced. I think further than that, again, which I think is a term used a lot with Nolan, but he is a very much a visual filmmaker. He creates spectacles, and I think this Dunkirk is no different. I would actually argue, in my opinion, I think Dunkirk is his best looking film. I really, really do. I think the use of practical effects is incredible. I think the sound design is haunting. Who did the sound? Did Hans Zimmer do Dunkirk? No, he didn't. It was
Hans Zimmer did
the guy who did Oppenheimer. It was the guy who did Oppenheimer, wasn't it?
No, Hans Zimmer did Dunkirk.
Oh no, the guy who did Oppenheimer did Tenet. Yeah, because I watched fucking one Dunkirk song at Hans Zimmer. I'm lying. The guy, he did Dunkirk. The sound design is so incredibly haunting, and I think it really shows a perspective that is kind of unseen in war films, especially with his decision to not showcase any of the enemy in itself. And I really like the different plot lines it follows. So this is where I get into like the high rated Nolan to me. This is a 4.5. So going up from 4 to 4.5. And I think this is really, really a great film that I think this might be one of his lowest rated. Not across the board on Letterboxd, stuff like that, which does surprise me. But I think also it's kind of a misunderstood film where people went into a war film expecting like the usual war epic we're used to seeing, and this kind of contained story, which obviously we don't get. It's a lot more complex than that in the way that it showcases its characters, which aren't really there. Yeah, I think it's incredible. I think this actually could go even higher for me on rewatch. This could even end up going 2 or 1. I really, really like Dunkirk. I think it's great. And yeah, that is my 3 at my first 4.5 out of 5.
Yeah, Dunkirk currently sits at number 7 on like Nolan's ranking
Is that on, like, Letterboxd?
Average Letterboxd rating. Yeah, it's number
I
7.
thought it was lower, actually.
Yeah, it's at a 3.8. It's tied with The Batman Begins, and then
Just
there's a
higher than
massive
Batman
jump to 4.2 for Memento.
Memento, okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it sits right now. So right in the middle of the pack. Tyler, your number 3.
Yeah, my number 3 is Interstellar, and I'm really happy to hear we all have it so highly because obviously it's a very contested film in the film community, but I've had such a trip with Interstellar. I've probably seen it like 10 times in my life, and I started immediately when I first saw it and rewatched it initially. I was at like a 5 stars. Like, it was one of the best movies I've ever seen. Blew my mind. Loved the acting. The emotion worked for me. I loved everything about it. Then I went through a couple of rewatches where like the whole end sequence with the wormhole and the time dilation and the whole full circle time continuity and breaking the, like, getting into the 4th dimension type stuff. Then that like almost broke the movie for me. And I was like, oh, this is like a 3-star movie in my mind. I was like, I just didn't really like the ending. It was like kind of just like gets like too far-fetched, even though this is a movie that's like so insanely far-fetched, obviously in science fiction. And then I started rewatching it again the last 2 times, and it's back to 5 star because I'm like, I think I just got into watching and reviewing film more critically, like since I didn't care for the Interstellar much, and I'm like, I've just gotten to the point where like I just don't give a shit about stuff that's like unreal. Like, that's the point of film. Like, I love like being able to tell a story or a narrative with some like crazy ideas and concepts, especially in the science fiction realm. So I loved it. It's like weird because like I started Interstellar was like a 5 star. Then like at one point in my life I didn't care for it as much, and now I'm back to where I think it's just absolutely incredible. The score, nothing needs to be said there. It's amazing from Hans Zimmer. The Matthew McConaughey delivers such an emotional, gut-wrenching performance. Casey Affleck's a great side role as well. You got Anne Hathaway. Michael Caine, didn't care for him in the movie, mainly because you can't really hear a word he says, honestly. He's just like mumbling the whole time at such a low volume. You definitely need subtitles for him. But yeah, I just really love Interstellar. It moves me every time. Just recently rewatched it when my friend came and visited me. He'd never seen it, and I was really interested to hear his thoughts because he's more of a type who like tends to be like a hater on mainstream movies, and he's like, oh, I like only like indie projects.
Hey, it's me.
Yeah, but he'd never seen Interstellar, so I was like, I really wonder what he's gonna say. And then like it was one of those where he like didn't say a single word the whole movie, and then the movie ended. He's like, that was one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. I'm like, there we go, let's go. But yeah, Interstellar. A lot of people hate it in the film community. I don't really get why. I don't know. I just think it's like they. Oh yeah, for sure. Like, it's very popular to be like Interstellar's mid. Like, it's not just Alex Coleman. There's a lot of people who like want to hate on it.
Really? I thought this was like the consensus best for most people, from what I see on like TikTok.
Yeah, I mean more from like film Twitter and stuff. Like, people like are more anti-Nolan, like to rip down Interstellar. But I don't know. I have a great time.
Cool. It's cool to hate on the film bro movies.
It's cool to hate on anything Christopher Nolan for sure. Like, liking him's definitely not cool on film Twitter.
Yeah, even I don't hate on Nolan. That says a lot, to be fair.
Yeah.
So, you know.
I won't harp too much on my number 3 because Tyler just said everything I feel. Interstellar is also my number 3. This is just one of my most unforgettable movie theater experiences. I remember finishing this movie, walking out with my friends in silence, and then the entire car ride home, we basically screamed at each other, like talking about like what we had just seen. Obviously, we were stupid, like 16, 17-year-olds, so we were just losing our shit after watching this movie.
16, 17, you're old, bro.
I'm like a year older than you, dude.
Yeah, that's what it is.
But yeah, this is just, you guys know how much I love science fiction. You guys know how much I love, particularly science fiction space movies. And this is my wet dream. Everything from the visuals to the storytelling to Hans Zimmer's one of the greatest scores I've ever listened to. Tyler touching on Matthew McConaughey absolutely rings true. It's just such an emotional performance. The obviously the very famous scene in the movie is when he's watching back all of the video messages from his children, and that's just literally a just 5-minute masterclass in acting from McConaughey. It's so goddamn good. Tyler said everything I feel. I just absolutely love this thing. I've seen it. It has to be more than 10 times at this point, and it's just one of those movies that doesn't lose its value for me. I love watching it every single time. So Interstellar sits at my number 3 spot.
Also for Interstellar, Matt Damon with one of the most hateable cameos of all time. Just like, talk about a dude who doesn't enter a movie for 2 hours, comes in and just throws a wrench into the plans.
Just fucks everything. Oh my god, I didn't even the docking sequence, man. I clearly remember my theater just a collective gasp when that thing exploded. That was shit. Fuck, I'm gonna watch every Nolan movie today. Seth, what is your number 2?
Yeah. So my number 2 is also, well, not also, because you had 3, didn't you?
Yeah, that was our 3.
So my number 2 is Interstellar. A really interesting film. I actually only watched it for the first time, I want to say February last year. So it's not been crazy long time. Wait, what year are we in?
2023.
Wow. Yeah, last year. Jesus, man, I'm losing. Time is going so quick. Crazy. Yeah, so I only watched it probably like 18 months ago, whatever it was. On first watch, I think I give it around like a 4.5, which is around what I have it now. I think Interstellar is, again, I don't want to keep beating on the horn, but it is a visual spectacle. It's a huge, epic science fiction piece that is, in my opinion, one of the best science fiction films of this century so far. In the way that it handles space, I think, is really interesting, and I think I appreciate the research that went into that. Is the main thing, because I think I see a lot of science fiction movies which aren't completely there. I think Matthew McConaughey is fantastic, and I think that it works on a basis of showing relationship and showing the importance of a dad and a father relationship and connection and love. I will say that I am kind of with old Tyler, I guess. I don't love the ending. I actually really, really like Interstellar, and there's definitely a case that could be made if the ending was slightly different. I could give this a 5-star because it's a 4.5. I think it's great. I don't love the way they handle the ending. I think using the power of love or whatever, not for me. I think they could have handled it a different way. But again, I think that it's powerful. It's not just an epic, which is what people mostly give it credit for. It is a beautiful piece on parenthood, on fatherhood, on connection. And I think that is shown through its many emotional sequences, such as the video message sequence, such as the how would you even describe what happens when he's like, no, no? You know what I mean?
Exactly like that.
No.
That was perfect.
Yeah, that was good, wasn't it? It's like, I think it's kind of, again, what I said earlier, it's one of Nolan's most kind of emotionally expressive films. And that is a critique I've had of Nolan before, in that I think a lot of his films are visual epics that are beautiful to the eyes, but don't really provoke you any further. Me with Inception, for example, but I think Interstellar kind of goes beyond that, and it tackles both and has the perfect balance between the two, between narrative and creating this visual story. The only criticism I have of Interstellar is the ending. I actually don't mind the exposition at all in this one. I think it's needed. I think it's there. I don't think it's overused. I think all the cast do a great job. What's her name? Jessica Chastain, particularly, Matthew McConaughey, both fantastic. Anne Hathaway, whatever. And again, going to the Matt Damon cameo as well.
Can't forget Timothy Chalamet also.
Timmy.
Timmy.
I often forget. You know when that trend was going around on TikTok, where it was like you got 3 acts and you had to name all the films they've been in. I just completely forgot he was in Interstellar. You know, when I think of Interstellar, I never remember he's in it at all. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
That had to be like his first major casting, I'd imagine.
Yeah,
I mean, kind of similar for like Barry Keoghan for Dunkirk. That's kind of like the first like blockbuster that cast them, but they have such a minor role, you kind of forget they're in it.
Yeah, Barry Keoghan in Dunkirk. Didn't he fall downstairs and die?
Yeah, that's all he does really in the movie.
That's all he does. He just fell downstairs, died, and that was it.
Oh, actually, first blockbuster. When did Killing of a Sacred Deer come out? Because that was pretty.
That might be 20.
Oh, same year.
Yeah,
same year. That's crazy.
Yeah, but obviously Dunkirk's like a different level. In terms
But
I like what Seth said about like Interstellar not just being a visual epic or like an epic space movie, because it is such like a human story at its core. Like I feel like if you're like a 40-year-old dad who has kids who are like college age and you feel like you like wasted their childhood like working long hours or something, and you like are looking at your kids going off and leaving the house and you're like, fuck, I wasted a lot of their life because I was just working so much. I feel like Interstellar is a movie that would like make you want to drive in incoming traffic on the way home. Like just really like it's definitely a movie where I feel like dads who work too much would be like it would break them for sure, because it's just you're just like, fuck, why am I like wasting my kid's life by just sitting in the office all day?
Yeah, super personal.
The score is just as good as
it's so goddamn good, man. Tyler, what is your number 2?
Yeah, number 2 is Dunkirk. So both of you have already touched on it, but I really do think this is visually the best Christopher Nolan film, and I think it is such an underrated movie and very much a misunderstood movie. But because when I saw it the first time, I even misunderstood it, but rewatching it all came together for me. Like, you don't know, you don't get much personal details on these soldiers, and that's the point. Like, these are just supposed to be faceless, nameless individuals that are working as a collective for the cause. You never see the villain, you never see epic combat, and I feel like the whole movie gets kind of summed up in the final lines of the movie, where you kind of watch, you're like, what was the whole point of that? Like, you don't really see, like, most war films, I feel like they feel like, oh, we have to show the resolution of the war at the end. We have to, like, finish it off by, like, showing everything that finally happened. But, you know, they kind of get back, and Harry Styles and the other main guy kind of get on land, and then they get handed a blanket, and they're like, well done, lads. And they're like, all we did was survive. And they're like, that's enough. And, like, that's the whole point of the movie. Like, you're not looking at the conclusion of the war. You don't see the villain. You don't see fighting. You don't get to know these people's backstories. It's like all they literally did was survive impossible situation, and this movie tells the details of that. And you really, like, Tom Hardy doesn't say a single word this whole movie, yet his character arc is so beautiful in terms of he's just you don't see him, you don't hear him, but he's protecting people. And that's kind of what the whole purpose of this movie is. You don't know these people's names, you don't know who these soldiers are, but they're out there protecting you, keeping a watchful eye over you, protecting your life and your freedoms. Yeah, Dunkirk's, like, just a masterpiece of a movie, I think. And yeah, like, the visuals are just so crazy. And I think that's the thing. Like, so many movies you can point to saying, like, oh, there's some wonky visuals here, wonky CGI. But I don't think any Christopher Nolan movie ever really has any of those moments, because he is so committed to the production design and doing this stuff practically, that I just feel like people, especially the people who like to hate on film bro movies, just don't give him enough credit for, because his movies do all just look so visually good, because he does invest so much into the production and the practical side of things, that really all his movies age to a point where you can go back and watch them and not be like, ooh, that doesn't look great. Like, Dunkirk's going to look flawless in, like, several years, because there's no big, you know, legs being blown off or bombs being dropped on people. Like, there's no crazy, like, set piece like that. It's really just a very human film. And easily one of the biggest jumps in a film rating for me personally on watch to rewatch. I didn't log it when I first saw it, because I saw it in theaters, and it was like a 3-star for me. I was in college, I went with buddies. I was like, I don't know, I was kind of bored with that, honestly. And then I rewatched it, I'm like, this is a 5-star masterpiece. So really like Dunkirk.
It hurts Dunkirk. Obviously, it's obvious from the name, but I think it hurts a lot of people's perception going into it as a film in the war genre, because they're used to seeing all Quiet on the, obviously not the same, but All Quiet on the Western Fronts, the 1917s, where it shows this kind of visceral, violent imagery, whereas Dunkirk is a lot more self-contained. Like, for example, I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Dunkirk wasn't R-rated or like a 15 of in UK, was it?
I think it.
I actually don't think so. I don't remember anything that would have, like, jumped out as making it rated R.
That's what I mean. Whereas in comparison to usual war films, it is very visceral, its imagery and brutal and grotesque. But I think Dunkirk is such a self-contained story that doesn't have to be that, because, as Tyler said, it is so human in the way it portrays its characters, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't think it was R-rated.
No, PG-13.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think even that would have, for a lot of people, and I probably wouldn't when I was younger, you see a war film and it's PG-13 or like 15 in the UK or 12 in the UK, you're going to look at it differently. Do you know what I mean? You're going to not going to be there. So yeah, I completely agree with what Tyler was saying.
Yeah, my number 2 is Inception. I can't even express to you my love for this film. Again, it's just science fiction on this grand scale. It's Nolan just taking risks, pushing the boundaries of what science fiction can be. And I just absolutely fucking love it. I think it's one of Nolan's most, rewatchable films, just in terms of every time you watch it, you gain something new from it. And I think that's just such a incredible quality to have in one of your films. I do agree. I think, Tyler, you mentioned it. I didn't much care for the whole Leo and his wife storyline. I don't think that hindered it. I think that did add, like, a little bit of an emotional aspect to this movie. And it also led to a classic Leo screaming scene, which I'll never complain about. But that's the one part of the movie where I just didn't much care for it. But other than that, this is just a brilliant piece of filmmaking. I absolutely love it. I think it's so engaging. It's so intriguing. It's so complex. And like I said, you just get something out of it every single time you watch it. Every time you watch it, it kind of feels like a first watch, because you're learning new information. You're seeing something you maybe didn't see previously. And I absolutely love that. And then, just like Interstellar, nothing we need to say about the score. Hans Zimmer just doing his thing with these massive horns, which just adds to like the scale of this movie. I fucking love it. Elliot Page, I think, turns in such an amazing supporting performance. Or would we call that supporting or may? I would call it supporting.
I call it supporting.
But I would call it supporting. I think I'm not gonna lie, I don't know Elliot Page's pronoun, so I'm gonna assume it's he.
Yeah, it's either he or they. I honestly don't know.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure it's he. I'm pretty sure it's he.
It's
I'm
the
gonna
thought that
assume it's
counts,
he.
though. We're trying.
Yeah. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing him. But yeah, I think he just works so goddamn well right there with Nolan. Their two characters are so like apart in morality and kind of how they approach this dream jumping, and I just think that adds so many layers to this already, really solid screenplay. The whole cast, I think, turns in fantastic performances from Tom Hardy to Joseph Gordon-Levitt. So that's my number two.
I do want to say one quick last thing on Dunkirk, because you mentioned the score and it reminded me.
Yeah.
Dunkirk's score from Hans Zimmer is like not anywhere near his top 10 most iconic scores of all time. No one's going to debate that, but I think this might be the most effective Hans Zimmer score ever for me. Like when I was watching it, I was like almost like at anxiety attack levels throughout this entire movie of how like nauseating his score was. It's a lot of like violin strings pluckiness, and like I think like maybe recency bias, but in terms of most effective Hans Zimmer scores, like the Dunkirk score just like had me on the edge of my seat the entire time.
All of his scores, that's like, listen, I'm gonna suck off Hans Zimmer. The glazing is like
Cam's
crazy
not here,
here,
so
but
it's okay.
yeah, Cam's not here, so I can. But like that's one thing that I love about Hans Zimmer. He's so good at adapting to like different genres and meeting different expectations. I mean, just with Christopher Nolan alone, he's done comic book movies, he's done a war film, he's done 2 science fiction films. He's all over the place in genres, and he just does such a good job at like knowing exactly what these genres require to like fully enhance the experience of his viewer. And it's just fucking incredible. Seth, I know what your number one is. Go for it.
Yeah. So my number one is The Dark Knight. And I think this is an interesting one. Because when people tell me that they don't particularly love The Dark Knight, or have it low on their Nolan rankings, like Tyler did, I actually completely understand. I think The Dark Knight is very much a film for me where I don't really have to go into the details of the film, because I actually understand the faults and I understand the criticisms people have of The Dark Knight in general. But I think The Dark Knight for me, as someone growing up who was never into into superhero films, and well, maybe the first, obviously the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, and that was about it. I think The Dark Knight kind of took it to a position of this was the first and maybe only ever superhero film I've genuinely loved. This is today the only superhero film I have at a 5-star.
Yes.
Wait, some reason
I
didn't realize you had. I thought you had no Nolans at a 5-star, and I was going to be a little salty.
No, I've done. I swear we have this conversation about me having that.
Yeah, we do have this conversation all the time.
I always get the Dark Knight and the Empire Strikes Back confused, I guess.
Yeah, so it's like it's more this comes from like a childhood love. I think I actually remember going to see this when I was fucking even old. I was maybe 10, whatever. And being there and kind of rewatching it as a kid, and I actually haven't watched it in about 6 months to a year, so I might get around to it soon. And even though I completely understand the faults, and I do think there is, especially with the hand-time combat, which again, Nolan, man, like some of the choreography on this combat wasn't great. I don't even care, George. I do not care.
I mean, I don't disagree with you.
Oh, really? Okay, fair enough.
No.
But I think that it just stands out to me as something that when I was growing up is the only superhero film I really loved, something that really took me in to, I guess, the Batman world, and I think it made me appreciate Batman's. Like I remember watching this and going to watch the Keaton Batmans, the Clooney Batmans, which again was a little bit weird, and then kind of progressing on and just being so interested in the character because of this particular film or Begins and The Dark Knight. And I think Dark Knight is just a huge epic that deserves to be applauded. It transcends a superhero movie in my eyes. It's a crime drama such as the Batman did last year. I think it's absolutely the same in the way that it transcends comic book movies, or at least the way that they are perceived. And I think it does it in such a way which is just a really perfectly executed crime drama that has all the elements of a blockbuster and all the elements that a blockbuster needs to succeed, which is why it did so. Did Dark Knight make $1 billion?
Yeah.
Okay. Why it did so well. And yeah, it's a 5 out of 5 for me. It's the only Nolan I have a 5 out of 5. It's also the only superhero film I have a 5 out of 5. And it's just a film that I'm kind of worried about rewatching it. Do you know what I mean? Like I like what Tyler said. I feel like I'm kind of worried about watching this, but I also think even if I did rewatch it, even if I noticed the small faults, the kind of memories I have won't overtake the memories, I guess. So I don't imagine anything overtaking this as my number one Nolan, and that is obviously The Dark Knight.
Yeah, obviously, I'll just back that up. Believe it or not, The Dark Knight is also my number one.
Wow.
That might come as a shock to some of you. No, this is my favorite movie of all time. It's got to be easily my most rewatched movie of all time. Just growing up as a massive fan of Batman comics, the Batman animated series, as well as even like Keaton's Batman. This was just the culmination of everything I love about this character. It's, you know, the Long Halloween brought to life. It's Year 2 brought to life. These are graphic novels. And I just think it embodies the character of Batman and this particular story, with his relationship to the Joker, as well as the mob aspect of Gotham. I think it just brings everything together so goddamn incredibly. Heath Ledger obviously turning in my mind, one of the best performances of all time, easily the best villain performance in a comic book movie of all time in my mind. Hans Zimmer's score, again, he's just so good at capturing, you know, whatever he needs to capture. And this for me personally just stands head and shoulders above any other comic book score. And no matter how much I love, you know, Michael.
I've seen it live, George. It's really good, actually.
Yeah, thanks, man. But as much as I love like Michael Giacchino's score in the Batman, I don't even think it touches Hans Zimmer's score in The Dark Knight. There's I could write a fucking dissertation on this movie, but we're a little pressed for time, so I'm going to stop it there. It's my favorite movie.
Write a dissertation. Is it a film you think you could run through screen by screen? You know, like the Raiders boys do.
I think I could. Yeah,
I feel like this is your film. Yeah,
I think there are like a handful of films I could do that for. And The Dark Knight is
like your Lord of the Rings for me.
Yeah, it's without a doubt. I think I could rewrite a few scenes and get the dialogue perfectly, especially like scenes with the Joker. But yeah, favorite movie of all time. It's in like my top 5 best films ever of all time. It's my number 1 comic book movie of all time, my number 1 Batman movie of all time. So yeah, that's my number 1. Tyler?
Yeah, my number 1 is The Prestige. Just absolutely love it. Seen it multiple times. I think this is the best scale for a Christopher Nolan mindfuckery movie, because Memento, we talked about, it's a little tough for someone to get into on a casual basis. Inception and Tenet are obviously grand scale mindfuckery movies. Interstellar has the crazy ending that really takes a sci-fi twist, whereas The Prestige has a lot of, you know, magic, sleight of hand twists. There's you have the twins, the identical twins, like that's, you know, more of like a muted, more, you know, 1800s-esque twist. But then also you have major things like the cloning from Nikola Tesla and all those science experiments. That's where you really start to get flashes of some craziness and some science fiction. But I feel like more so like the way he was able to keep these twists felt very human and felt very down to earth. And I don't know, this just has everything you want personally from like a mindfuck movie, in terms of there's a complicated plot with twists that's so well done, and it has like the perfect one-liners every time. Like Christian Bale delivers some perfect iconic lines. Are you watching closely? Abracadabra. And it's just all so perfectly done that I just loved everything. Everything was just a cherry on top.
Is this a 10 out of 10 for you?
No, it's a 9.8. I haven't watched it in over 2 years now, so maybe on rewatch it might bump up. But the thing is, like, I think a lot of Christopher Nolan people have issues with Christopher Nolan and how he makes relationship dynamics. I think The Prestige for me is the best one. Like, you really feel for the wife who, because obviously she's basically married to 2 men, and she's obviously incredibly depressed because it feels like she's married to 2 men. Spoiler for a movie from 17 years ago, man. And you're watching a Christopher Nolan specific podcast, so it's your own fault. But you really kind of just like feel for her so hard, and I feel like that was the most I ever felt for like a female in a Christopher Nolan movie, where I feel like they're mostly written kind of thinly, whereas I really just like felt her pain throughout this entirety of this movie. But yeah, I don't know, incredible acting. I don't know like when the production of this was, because this came out between Begins and Rises, or Begins and Dark Knight, but I wouldn't be surprised if this was filmed before Begins. I don't know, it just feels weird, like Christian Bale, like, yeah, Christian Bale bouncing from Batman to this to back to Batman would feel a little weird. But yeah, I mean, I can't say enough good things about The Prestige. It's one of those movies that when I saw it for the first time, like I immediately like tried to get everyone I knew to watch it. I'm like, and I think actually when I first saw it, I didn't even know this was a Christopher Nolan movie. Like I watched it years and years and years ago, and it was just kind of like saw a movie. I'm like, oh, let's watch this like magician movie, because also like I think Seth mentioned, I love the production sets to this and the design, like the 1800s, like old town Colorado, kind of the beginning of the electronic age. Like it's just super cool, and like lends itself to some super cool costumes and stuff. So yeah, Prestige is awesome.
Well, there you have it. Let's recap our top 5 very quickly. My number 5 was The Prestige. At number 4, I had Memento, 3, Interstellar, 2, Inception, 1, The Dark Knight. Seth, your top 5?
Yeah, it was Prestige at 5, Inception 4, Dunkirk 3, Interstellar 2, and The Dark Knight 1.
Tyler? Yep, and then 5 for me is Inception, 4 Memento, 3 Interstellar, 2 Dunkirk, and 1 The Prestige. And I want to do one quick fun thing with you guys. Since this is going to be uploaded on Wednesday, which means George and I will have already seen Oppenheimer, and I think like that'll be like the day Seth is seeing Oppenheimer. But just quickly guess, just a prediction. I don't
know anymore.
Might change, might move up, but who knows? But guess where in this ranking? So that he'll obviously have 12 films at this point. Just making a prediction where you think it's going to land. For me, I'm going to go with 2. I think it's going to land 2 for me, just behind The Prestige. That's my bold prediction. I have high hopes for Oppenheimer, which is scary, but I'm predicting 2.
I actually had this conversation with someone yesterday because they asked me when I was live on TikTok. I said 4. So I think Inception will be 5 and Dunkirk will stay 3. I think it slots into 4. So high expectations.
I'm going to go right with Seth. I think I'm going to slot this in between Interstellar and Memento. So it would be my number 4, pushing everything back 1.
But I'm telling you right now,
this is such a hard question.
This is scary for
me.
Yeah.
It would for me to get at 4, it would just need a high 4 star.
No.
For you guys, it would need like what would it need for you, Tyler? Like out of 10 on your
a 9.6 or no, yeah, 9.6 or above. But no, I'm not even kidding you. This is how high my expectations are. I wouldn't even be surprised if Oppenheimer drops a 1 bomb on me. That's like I have high hopes.
I'm gonna set my expectations straight just so I don't go in and get
disappointed.
I'm gonna say I end Oppenheimer at a 4.5 out of 5, and I'm gonna slot it between The Prestige and Batman Begins for the number 6 spot.
I think I'll give it a 4.5. I think 4. I think 4 for me. I hope
that's God. I mean, listen, if this is in my top 4, I'll cream my pants. But all right. That wraps up ReelQuick, episode 74, our Christopher Nolan ranking. If you're watching on YouTube, drop your ranking in the comments. Let us know how you stack up Christopher Nolan's filmography. And if you haven't seen Oppenheimer, give us your prediction on where you think you're going to rate it.
I just want to mention as well, sorry, George, before you finish.
No, go for it.
With the strikes and stuff, we are going to be focusing a lot on some older content as well. So if you have any other directors you want us to rank their filmographies of, I'm sure all of us guys will be happy to watch some of all the directors and then do some videos like this, because I know people have been asking for it. So if you have any specific directors, feel free to drop in the comments or give us a message or whatever you want to do. That's fine.
Yeah, yep, completely agree. We're going to try play around with a couple of episodes going forward while the strike is going on. So anything you guys want us to hear, let us know, and maybe we'll get around to it. But thank you all for stopping in. For those of you at this point when this episode drops, if you have not seen Oppenheimer yet, enjoy. Drop your, predictions in the comments where you think you'll rate it. But we will see you tomorrow for episode 75.